Right. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. Good? Yep. All right. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to share something. This is from a Christian writer that I just came across today. I think it kind of frames something nicely. When the internet first emerged, it was framed as a tool for liberation. We believed it would democratize information, give a voice to the voiceless, foster a global village of informed citizens. In many ways, it has. We carry pocket-sized supercomputers that grant us instant access to medical research, ancient literature, and the collective stories of humanity. Yet instead of fostering deeper understanding, the internet has become a battleground of chaos, a playground for algorithms that prioritize outrage over insight, and a mirror reflecting our most fragmented selves. So today, the paradox is undeniable. We are more connected than ever, yet lonelier, more informed than ever, yet more confused, more entertained than ever, yet emptier than before. Studies show that rates of anxiety, depression, and social isolation have skyrocketed, along with smartphone adoption. Birth and marriage rates have plummeted. Political discourse has devolved into performative tribalism, where nuance is drowned out by the next viral hot take. Even our relationships with truth have frayed. How can we distinguish fact from fiction when every click rewards sensationalism? So I thought that was very interesting because, um, you know, I was referred once to an article. I can't remember where I found it. I don't have access to it anymore, but it was at the time of the invention of the telephone. There was some newspaper article was talking about how this was going to bring world peace because now people could talk to each other. This is what I think the Buddhist teaching analysis of all this of samsara and the first noble truth is so profound. It's like this incredible beacon of light, and yet people don't know or people can't accept it fully because it is profound. It's not just a simple, conceptual statement. To embrace it fully um, is definitely on the path. So tonight we're continuing in the Tibetan tradition of mental development in the chapter on karma, cause and effect. I don't know if we all have the same editions of the book, but in the law of cause and effect chapter, for me it's page 73. It's called living in accordance with the law of cause and effect. So last time the text had listed the 10 non-virtues, and this is Geshe Nawandarge again. He's saying after recognizing these 10 non-virtuous acts, one should develop the wish to abandon them, and to do so requires moral discipline. When rising in the morning, one should first correct one's motivation and renew the intention to avoid these actions. Throughout the day, one must be mindful, and whenever one of these acts is committed, one must apply the 4 opponent powers. You'll talk about that later. This protects one from falling into the 3 lower realms. Just before sleep, one should review the day's actions and determine if they were virtuous or unvirtuous. It is important to look for one's own faults rather than those of others. Once, one of Atisha's disciples was reading a text on the Vinaya. These are the moral discipline rules. So traditionally, we talk about the 3 the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets. One is the basket of the Vinaya, the ethical rules. And the second is the sutras, the spoken words of the Buddha. And then the third basket was the Abhidharma, the kind of, the commentaries. Once one of Atisha's disciples was reading a text on Vinaya while seated on a leather cushion. He came across a rule stating that monks were not allowed to sit on leather and immediately threw his cushion away. He read on further and found that this is permitted if the monk lives in a very cold climate, so he retrieved his cushion. One should put one's learning into action immediately in this same way. Buddhahood is attained by removing one's delusions day by day. Buddha nature lies within everyone. One must realize this and live accordingly. The 6 factors which determine the weight of one's karma are as follows. First is the nature of the karma. The heaviest karma is due to killing, and the lightest is due to idle gossip. This is because among the unvirtuous actions of body and speech, killing causes the most suffering and idle gossip the least. The worst mental vice is holding wrong views, especially concerning the law of cause and effect, for this allows one to commit any act without the least feeling of remorse. Thus, it is also the worst of the 10 non-virtuous acts. So he's speaking here of body, speech, and mind, right? Non-virtuous of body, speech, and mind. And the worst, well, you can think of it as the grossest, and this the heaviest, just by its nature, obviously, is that of the body. Body is heavier than the speech, heavier than the mind. And of these, killing is the worst for the reasons that he gives. Then in the 4 non-virtues of speech, gossip is the least. In other words, when you slander someone, for instance, that hurts big time. Whereas gossip is does the least immediate harm. But of course, it can be accumulated. So there is first the nature of the karma, the 6 factors determining the weight of karma. First is the nature of the karma itself. Second is the force of the thought. The weight of karma varies according to the intensity of the mental force which guides the act. For instance, abuse, which may result in light karma, becomes a greater vice if it is accompanied by strong anger. You can see why there's so much emphasis in the Bodhicharya Avatara, how the chapter on patience, the antidote to anger, is as long and profound as the chapter on wisdom, chapter 9. Why? Because of our negative karma, the heaviest one is killing, right? But also the power of anger, the force of the angry thought, can inform any of the others and also adds to the seriousness, the weight. So then next is the action. Examples of this aspect are skinning an animal before it's dead, or boiling animals alive, thus prolonging their death and inflicting much suffering. So the action itself makes a difference. Is there lots of suffering there? Sometimes even extreme suffering. Fourth is the object. There is an especially heavy karmic effect due to harming any of the objects of the 5 heinous crimes. That is, one's mother, one's father, an arhat, a Buddha, or the Sangha. This is because our parents have shown us great kindness, and the latter 3, the arhat, the Buddha, and the Sangha, have the ability to lead others from suffering. This is so interesting to me. We all sort of have an understanding, that an arhat can lead you away from suffering, sure. Also that a bodhisattva can. But the Sangha can. I don't think, certainly in the West, many people don't hold the Sangha as being on the same level, so to speak, as the Buddha or the Dharma. And so it's interesting how he says this, because these are traditional teachings. So the object of our karma. Then 5th is the constant commitment. If one continually kills insects, gossips, or acts in other unvirtuous ways, leaving these acts unchecked, their karmic weight increases accordingly. And you can understand that because, again, all of this, right? All practice is about training the mind. You just keep it going in the right direction, so to speak, and eventually it becomes, habitual. And when the habit is understood, all the better. So this karma, this habituality of the mind is a very powerful thing. And if we're doing some negative thing again and again and again, but importantly, like he says, leaving these acts unchecked. So this is mean, like a pure negative act, just going, 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 and repeating every day. You see how you're building a habit, and that's particularly heavy. And then finally, the opponent forces. When one is ill, the germs in the body will destroy life if there are no counteragents. In the same way, the weight of karma increases continually in the absence of the opposing forces of virtuous action and application of the four opponent powers. So we do nothing about it. The weight kind of like snowballs. The tendency is like that. The longer it's been around, kind of the harder, the more weight it has. It is important to recognize and understand these six influences on the weight of karma, and then apply this understanding to one's own actions. Having done so, if one were still to persist in committing grave unvirtuous acts, it would be like jumping off a cliff with full awareness. For each of the 10 non-virtuous acts, there are three kinds of effect. First is the immediate and main effect. And then second is an effect which is consistent with its cause. And finally, an environmental effect. So the immediate effect, an effect which is consistent with its cause, and finally, environmental. So to give you an idea, on killing, for instance, the main effect, which is also called the ripening effect. So the main effect of killing is rebirth in one of the three lower realms, depending on the karmic weight of the action. The effect which is consistent with its cause is then after the person has returned from low rebirth and again taken birth as a human being, he will have the tendency to kill and is likely to have only a short life or one with much illness. Such people often die in their childhood, or if they live to an old age, they continually suffer due to illness. Further, some children delight in killing, whereas others do not, and this is due to the habits formed in previous lives. So that's the effect which is consistent with the cause. In other words, the cause is the killing, and the effect here that's consistent is all these kind of, destructive kind of habits and acts. And finally, an environmental effect of killing. The third effect is that in the next human life, if the person falls ill, medicine is not effective and food gives little nourishment. In earlier times, food was much more nourishing, but now, due to mass unvirtuous karma, the level of nourishment is decreasing. The higher teachings of the Dharma all rest on these basic principles concerning cause and effect. And the Tibetan word for to practice is nyamlen, meaning to destroy vice and accept virtue. Now, since one has the ability to shape one's next rebirth, it should be done with care. Shantideva wrote, "Everyone is careful not to fall off cliffs only a few feet high, yet the abyss of the lower realms is vast in depth." So one should restrain oneself from following action that leads to these lower realms and also guide one's friends away from unvirtuous action. And he goes through all of the 10 non-virtues with the main effect and then the effect that is sort of in accord with the cause, and then finally the environmental. So this is very helpful because it's very detailed. I'm going to jump to wrong views because it's being the most negative of the 10 non-virtues. Think of this too, that wrong view is more negative than killing. And we live in such a materialistic age, and everyone's aware of killing and that. And we understand, people naturally understand, how negative this is. But the fact that wrong view is heavier negative karma, this is something that, is not widely recognized. So in wrong views, rebirth in the lowest realms is the main result of holding wrong views. So with killing, what was the effect? Well, you can go to the three lower realms. It means animal, hungry ghost, hellish beings. But for wrong view, you go to the lowest of the hell realms. And then The general, when the effect is consistent with the cause. It says, on again taking human rebirth, understanding through contemplation is very difficult, and realization of emptiness requires a long time. Dullness and stupidity are also a result, and one naturally continues holding the wrong views held for so long. It's amazing the solidity, you might say, of the mind. Think of the nature you see in your meditation, just how, I mean, it's beyond fluid, and yet, how we cling to a particular view. And then finally, the environmental effect. If one goes to a spring, the water stops flowing, or if to a mine, one finds no treasure. Of the four main schools of thought in ancient India, excuse me, I have one emergency thing I have to send here to a client. Bear with me for a second. Yeah, we hope so, right? Yeah, server not found. Isn't that how it goes? That's that's the hell no, right? Right. Isn't that right? Okay. Dave, do you know the password for our internet here, or do we even need one for White Lotus? Yeah. Wow. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there we go. That's why I'm having trouble. Okay. If I can even find out how to do that. Yeah, if you would, thanks.
We muted the volume for a couple minutes.
Okay. Okay, of the four main schools of thought in ancient India, three accepted the law of cause and effect, while the other believed only in events which can be directly experienced and rejected all abstract thought. For such subjects as rebirth, karma, and emptiness, we need to use reason and abstract thought. Kanzi says somewhere, he just remarks about how Buddhism is such a thinking man's religion. He did some analysis, for instance, in the Heart Sutra, the number of words that have Sanskrit roots in them that pertain to, mind or wisdom, such as prajna, that J and A. Anyway, after contemplating these results, remorse should arise concerning one's past unvirtuous conduct, coupled with a strong determination, backed by sound reason, to abandon such action. And of course, this is so such good sense. It says that you have to hear the teaching, right? You have to at least know that there's this possibility out there, and hear some sort of so that it comes into your consciousness. But then you have to analyze. This is a step that often just gets forgotten by so many people. You analyze and then you go to meditation. So there's so many people who, are attracted one way or another with meditation, but there's no analysis. Whereas if you do this kind of analysis, then what? You're more confident. Even with all the thoughts arising in your mind, they don't have the weight because you've seen through the emptiness of them, even in the falsity of them, so to speak, even just conceptually. So after contemplating these results, remorse should arise concerning one's past unvirtuous conduct, coupled with a strong determination, backed by sound reason, to abandon such action. Formal meditation must be preceded by examination meditation. The former relies upon the latter. So the formal meditation relies upon the examination meditation or analysis, I've been saying. And the latter depends on knowledge gained through hearing and teaching. Without this, sure progress is impossible. Sakya Pandita wrote that one who meditates without first receiving teachings is like a man climbing a mountain with no hands. Formal meditation must be preceded by the use of the intellect. Otherwise, the vast teaching of the Buddha, the effort of those who wrote down his words and of others who wrote commentaries would all have been in vain. The Buddha told Shariputra, those who like meditation but ignore the sutras were blessed by Mara. Intellectual understanding increases the power of the rational mind, and this increases the power of formal meditation. The Mahayana attitude is to be willing to undergo any hardship in order to reach higher attainment. As for Tantra, even studying it, not to speak of practicing it, requires much effort. Within Tibetan Buddhism, there are four traditions, but after gaining insight through following any one of them, one sees that they all rest on the same foundation, the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, and all strive after the same goal, enlightenment. They are different paths to suit different capacities and sorts of people. One should never slander the teachings of a path different from one's own, but should rather look for harmony. It is up to the individual to choose which religion or tradition one wants to follow, but not for one to impose that choice on others. What a remarkable statement. I mean, this book written in the 1970 or before, I believe, by a completely traditional Gelo Geshe. And then welcome to the West, with all the differences that we have. Different paths to suit the different capacities and sorts of people. One should never slander the teachings of a path different from one's own, but should rather look for harmony. It is up to the individual to choose which religion or tradition one wants to follow, but not for one to impose that choice on others. In a very immediate way, you can see that the truth of this just in your interactions with people. And it doesn't have to be in a spiritual way, but you're in a situation where someone says something and it kind of triggers something in you. I don't mean triggers in the bad way, that brings to mind some valuable thing you could say to increase the understanding of the other person and whatever it is you're talking about. And we're so wild as human beings because there's so many people that, they get triggered instead of, wanting to learn, wanting to take what's being said. They don't have to accept it necessarily, but with an open mind, so to speak, and a healthy critical mind. But what often happens, some people are stronger with this than others, is that the particular word that's used, or the person that it's coming from, or the attitude, or the way they look, triggers a reaction, an emotional reaction in the hearer. And then instead of responding to the meaning of what has been said, they're just responding to their emotional obscuration. And so it's like communication seems impossible. So how much more if you have the attitude of trying to convince some person, hey, why don't you be Buddhist? It comes rather from example and from not trying to push like that. There can be rare moments when someone can say something very incisive that really strikes very deep with someone. Certainly the great lamas are capable of this for sure. And sometimes it's just kind of an innocuous kind of comment, but the conditions are right and it pierces, it goes deep. But for us in our worldly practice in that, you see how kind of pointless it is when you have an agenda. It's tricky because you want to be developing this motivation to liberate all, no doubt about it. But sometimes that's done by keeping our mouth shut in a particular situation. So I'm just struck on I'm just on the subtlety of the Buddhist teaching, and also the great benefit because here it is. I mean, it's all right there in the text, and they tell you, and it's so consistent. You go to different teachers, different lamas, whatever. It's the same kind of message and the same kind of detail being given. It's just so wonderful. It's been like honed, for 1,500 years. Uh, so special. So this large chapter is all on cause and effect. And completely taught according to the sutra, which means that we're using our conventional mind. We're using our conventional mind to get beyond our conventional mind, you might say. It's often said that the conceptual mind, for instance, is a wonderful student, tremendous help, like he said here, but it's a terrible master. Puts it in its proper perspective, and always just the idea of Buddha nature and Buddha. That's why this is so important. It gives immediate humility to the student listening. The sutra teachings, of course, are using, we have our outer activity. What do we see with people every day banging around in the streets, what they do, their actions, their speech. But the inner teachings of the sutra are the thoughts. So we're working with our thoughts. So when we meditate, our mind experience, anger arises, we label it as anger. And then we know we've thought about what to do with that. So we're working in an inner way rather than just this outer way of behavior, an inner way of looking at the thoughts that are stimulant, that are triggering and generating all these actions, whether virtuous or non-virtuous. We're seeing that process, and this is an inner process. But the Tantra goes a step further because you're seeing the actual experience, like the flavor of that anger, and you're dealing on that level. It's like a level one step more subtle, and therefore it's very powerful. But at the same time, can be misused because right now that's an unconscious process that's happening for us. This inner process that's triggering the anger, and then the anger, we're blind to that. So we're kind of like working backwards, you might say. We start out with the 10 non-virtues. It's like in this outer realm that everyone can understand. It's completely approachable. People know what you're talking about. There isn't some mystery here. So the teachings are accessible and therefore very helpful because you're talking to people where they're at, so to speak. And then they learn. But with the Tantra, we're going to step, secret. So there's the outer teachings, there's the inner teachings, the secret teachings, but then there are the very secret teachings too. But this is secret, not in the sense that there's some special club that we're trying to keep people out of, but rather it's secret from ourselves. And we're learning why it's secret. How do we fool ourselves in this way? And like you said, the Tantra takes tremendous study. And just to give you an idea of the inner, I wanted to read again from Rinpoche's teachings on Tantra, that is the visualization practice. Although this book, what we've been reading, the Tibetan tradition of mental development, is just on the sutra level. Because why? Because Tantra doesn't make any sense without the sutra. And yet here we are. So I'm reading from Garchen Rinpoche's book, Vajrakalaya. He's talking about attainment of Buddhahood through deity yoga. People generally think Buddhahood is something far distant, but this is not so. All the Buddhas emerged from sentient beings. For example, Buddha Shakyamuni was once the son of Shuddhadana. Aryatara was once a princess. As mentioned previously, the Tibetan term for Buddha is Sanjay, Sang meaning cleared away, and Gye meaning expanded. That is, when dualistic grasping has been cleared away, the mind expands, merging into the space of Dharmakaya. So many different interpretations to Sanjay, whether you're talking in an outer way, because they talk about Sang being pure, purifying all the negativities, and Gye being the accumulation of merit and all the virtues. That's the outer explanation of it. And people can understand that. They can relate to it, whether they believe it or not, but then they can. But here Rinpoche, see, is doing this inner, more subtle inner definition too. Sanjay, Sang meaning cleared away, and Gye meaning expanded. That is, when dualistic grasping has been cleared away, the mind expands, merging into the space of the Dharmakaya. And note that that's all completely spontaneous. It isn't that you do this and then you have the ability to jump to Buddhahood. It's just this natural process, like they say, the lotus petals unfolding. You can't rip open the petals. Some may wonder what happens or where one goes when enlightenment is attained. The answer is that one's mind, free of any reference point, utterly pervades the sphere of phenomena. Through cultivating the stages of development and completion, so again, formal visualization practice is marked by the development stage, sometimes called the creation stage, and then the completion stage. So one is the development stage, is this whole work of visualizing ourselves as a Buddha, creating the mandala, and all of this. And then the completion stage is resting in the mind of you, of that Buddha. All right. Through cultivating the stages of development and completion, those of highest faculties will, like Milarepa, become Buddhas in their very lifetime, manifesting the Dharmakaya in the first bardo. If one is unable to attain Buddhahood at that first juncture, then it is possible to do so in the second bardo. At the moment of wakening from sleep, one generally has disordered thoughts, such as, where am I? Who am I? So from the first moment of conscious awareness, there is a sense of self. However, through training in the development style yogas, one continually recalls the deity with a mind of great love, reciting his or her mantra and seeing an approximation of his or her form in the mind. As a result, at the moment of waking, one will recall and transform into the deity in the mantra, purifying the propensities of body and speech. This is so profound. But to understand this and have confidence in this is just a tremendous, tremendous blessing. He's speaking here in the Bardo. This is the other thing, the incredible opportunity that dying is. He's talking about the Bardo of the Dharmakaya. So at the moment of death and then awaking, it said the clear light, the sun clear light meeting, merging with the mother clear light. I mean, there's just this moment of Dharmakaya. It's said that it's like the snap of a fingers. The more one has practiced bodhicitta, the longer that moment seems to remain, giving you a greater chance for recognition. This is the first arising after death. The first bardo is called this Dharmakaya. So the moment of death. Now this is just remarkable because in our ordinary life, and we learn this in our own experience in meditation, there's just so many things that our gross existence that seem to be distracting, that causes problems. My knee hurts. There's just all this stuff going on. We're like so attached to this body, and it's such a gross existence in terms of heaviness, like compared to a neutrino, right? It's just naturally gross and thick. And so we're so anchored in that. And it's a great vehicle for coming to enlightenment, but at the same time, there are lots of difficulties with it. But when one dies, that's gone. And the Tibetans say, I mean, I love these numbers that they ascribe to things. It's like your mind is like 19 times more powerful because you don't have this obsessive thing going on with the body. I mean, think of it. You sit down to meditate, you're all inspired. You've been reading about bodhicitta. You got a teacher that inspires you, and here's your final chance to do some meditation. And there you are, and we're like ready to go, right? And the next thing you know, you get a tickle in your eye, and that distracts you from everything. Whereas the eye's gone, that isn't there either. All right. So, but then if that fails, which it does, then there's this whole arising of the peaceful and wrathful deities, and then this whole journey going through the bardo, seemingly. This is the second arising. Now, this is where the development creation stage are so powerful and helpful to us. Even in the sutra teachings, like the Pure Land teachings, they say all the chanting that you do of Amitabha's name, not to be discouraged, because your whole life could be said over just filling out without any kind of realization at all from that. And yet at the moment of death, it becomes very powerful. By having trained in this way, those of middling faculties will be liberated into the Sambhogakaya in the second bardo. That is to say, as soon as one thinks, now I have died, through the power of love, the thought of the deity will immediately arise in one's mind. Thus, the mind will transform into whichever deity one has practiced. In that very instant, the mind will have been subdued by the deity. This is because the mirror-like mind becomes free of self-grasping the moment one recalls the deity. Thus, the inherent qualities of the Buddha nature are made manifest in that moment. The individual who is free of dualistic grasping himself or herself will transform into the deity. Even a person with dualistic grasping will become like a small child seated on the lap of his or her parent, the Yidam deity. Such are the benefits of meditating again and again on the deity's form and mantra. Even those of lesser faculties who are not liberated into the Dharmakaya or Sambhogakaya must in any case become Buddhas as Nirmanakayas in the third bardo, due to having obtained empowerment in the secret mantric Vajra vehicle. These are some of the ways in which Buddhas actually manifest from among sentient beings. So then the birth process, one is born in a pure way. This is Nirmanakaya. Finally, even for those who do not have such accomplishment at the time of death, there is still great blessing from having made a connection with these practices. For example, it is said that if one receives a tantric empowerment, yet does not practice at all in that life, one will again receive empowerment after 7 lifetimes. and will then become able to engage the practice. So this is something, we just heard the Geshe talking about, uh, this uh, arhats, Buddhas, and the Sangha able to lead you out of suffering. The Sangha. This is really the core of so much that we, or the thought behind what we do here. I mean, why put up all these, tankas and the deity pictures and that? Why have a Dharma center at all? Why not people just practicing for their own liberation? It's because it plants a seed. This is so profound. I mean, it's a touch with your deepest nature, even if you're seeing it in an outer way. There's one scene in one of the movies, I think it's the one that uh, 7 Years in Tibet. I can't remember who made it anymore, but it came out, the Kundun movie by Martin Scorsese, and 7 Years in Tibet came out at the same time, 1997, I think, or 95, I can't remember. But nonetheless, there's a beautiful scene there where the Dalai Lama, I think it's Dalai Lama when he's fleeing Tibet, and they're going through the mountains, and they come to just some Tibetan guy who's off in the mountains, probably doesn't know the Dalai Lama's coming at all, but with his horse. And he gives his horse to the Dalai Lama. And it's that one pure moment like that. Also, another in the same movie when they're trying to, before the 7 years in Tibet, they're in India. Heinrich Harr is leading this mountain climbing expedition from Nazi Germany, and they're going to climb, I think, K2, one of these great Himalayan peaks. And of course, there's a blizzard, and they can't do it, so they have to come back. And when they're coming back, out of the snow, there is some Tibetan man who I think just puts his hands together, as a blessing. But there was just something about that in the movie, that little spark in his mind, his completely worldly being, but later ends up in Lhasa, working for the Dalai Lama. You just don't know the karmic effects of these pure moments. We can think back in our own lives, and you see some, vivid moments. I don't mean vivid that someone was blowing a horn and beating a drum, but it's just clear in your mind. Some memory from childhood, some seemingly irrelevant thing. These moments when you have clarity, it's so critical. And so to practice these, to do even a little bit, like you said, to have an empowerment here, and then do nothing. Within 7 lifetimes, you'll come to the practice again. And this profound practice that can lead to Buddhahood in one lifetime, the type of practice, the inner practices for our particular era, when the negatives are very strong and people are just upside down in their thinking. Like what I read from that Christian writer this morning, we have all this power of the internet, and look what happens. People just fight more. It's really sad. At any rate, I wanted to do that little bit from Gar Rinpoche on the Tantra to see the subtle, the inner cause and effect. Because the Geshe's teachings are just exactly wonderful, because it's speaking ordinary person that comes into White Lotus on a Sunday morning, never been there before. To one degree or another, they can relate to the words that are being spoken. There may be no understanding, but you're talking about the mind and anger and all these things, they can relate. Let's put it that way. Often with a Tantra, there's no relating because they don't understand the subtleness of it. This is cause and effect too. And Garz Rinpoche's language here is so interesting to me because it's completely realization. Instead of this outer view of you do this and this happens, here it's just like you drop the clinging and suddenly there's great expanse. It's just automatic. So yeah, very inspirational and very beneficial. So I recommend that book too. If any of you don't have it, Rinpoche's book on Vajrakalaya, he went around the world teaching this, and some of the teachings in this book were given here in Rochester. And then one other thing about these kinds of profound teachings. So this question comes up, and this is from the translator Ari Kiev. She said, because this manual, this book, this Vajrakalaya book, includes secret teachings, I asked Rinpoche about the threshold for readership, and he responded with the following words, quote, "It is said that compassionately looking with a long-range view on the future time of dregs, the Buddhas taught mantric sadhanas. Today that future has become manifest. Right now is the time of dregs, in which secret mantra teachings must be propagated. As Guru Padmasambhava prophesied, when the wicked era burns like fire, the potent force of secret mantra will blaze forth." And Ari continues, because of this, and because it is far better to receive the Buddha's teachings than not, Rinpoche has offered the instructions herein without demanding prerequisites like empowerment, maintaining pure perception without investigating or discriminating. He has given the Dharma with an open hand. This is one of the ways in which he upholds his samaya, or commitment, to beings and to the sources of refuge. It is not Rinpoche's style to offer the Buddha Dharma in a prescriptive way, establishing and policing rules of conduct. Instead, disciples must mature beyond outwardly imposed dictates, taking personal responsibility for our own actions, which are to be tempered by love and heedfulness of cause and effect. Thus, how we approach, receive, and integrate Rinpoche's instructions, how we uphold our own samaya, is a matter we must ultimately determine for ourselves. So the great freedom, but the great responsibility too. Okay, I think we'll stop there for tonight. Next time, the next chapter that we're doing in the Tibetan tradition of mental development is chapter 10, which is virtuous karma, which we all want to know, right? Okay, any other questions? Or yes, any questions or anything tonight from anybody?
Just something about in the 37 Bodhisattva practice, doesn't it say something about hear, think, and meditate night and day? And it
Yeah.
seems to be similar to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, in fact, you made me think of something else that he says in here. So just the paragraph before what I read tonight where I started. Rinpoche says, everything I have explained is based on a single line from the 37 practices of bodhisattvas. This is a different translation of ours, but you'll recognize the verse. When one is clear-sighted, certainty in Dharma is born. He says, every Dharma teaching, without exception, is subsumed within this line. So when one is clear-sighted, certainty as Dharma is born. It just makes such a difference. There's no, the 37 practices are completely included. It's like one part of the Dharma includes all, back and forth. Okay. We dedicate the merit from this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May we never forget their suffering. May we always work for their liberation and indeed full Buddhahood. And may we not stop until all that is free and true. Okay.